The elevator doors opened too slowly for what Caleb's heart was screaming. He stepped out onto the 4th floor of St. Anne's Medical Center in Ohio, still wearing the same wrinkled work shirt he'd slept in, his hair damp from the cold rain outside. He had come back early because something felt wrong, an invisible pressure in his chest that wouldn't let him breathe. The kind of feeling a son gets when his mother is suffering and the world is pretending everything is fine. He wasn't supposed to be here until morning. His wife had insisted on handling the late-night visit, promised she would sit with his mother, promised she would make sure the nurses did everything right. But now, as Caleb walked down the fluorescent hallway and saw his mother's room door slightly open, he heard something that made his blood freeze. His mother's weak coughing, then a sharp, panicked gasp, and then silence. The silence was the worst part. It was the kind of silence that meant danger had already stepped into the room. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and protecting the people who raised us, please take a moment to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone you love, and subscribe to the channel. Because stories like this remind us that love is not just a feeling, it's a responsibility. Caleb had always been the kind of man who carried responsibility like a second spine. He grew up in a small town outside Cleveland, the son of a hard-working single mother named Margaret, who stitched together a life with prayer, overtime shifts, and stubborn hope. Margaret wasn't perfect, but she was steady. She was the kind of mother who skipped meals so her child could eat, who hid her tears behind hymns, who made the world feel safe even when it wasn't. When Caleb earned a scholarship, she cried in church, thanking God like she'd been given a miracle. When he graduated and started working as a project manager, she never asked him for anything except to stay kind. And Caleb did. He stayed kind. He stayed loyal. He stayed the son who visited every Sunday, who fixed her porch steps, who carried her groceries, who called her every night even after he got married. His wife, Vanessa, had come into his life like a bright fire, beautiful, confident, ambitious. She was the kind of woman who could make a room turn its head. Caleb thought her boldness was strength. He thought her sharp words were just honesty, and when Margaret first met her, she smiled warmly and welcomed her like family, even when Vanessa's eyes measured the house like it was too small, too old, too simple. Vanessa had grown up different, more polished, more focused on appearances, more convinced that love should always come with comfort. Caleb didn't notice the early signs. He didn't notice how Vanessa would roll her eyes when Margaret talked too long, or how she'd complain on the drive home that Margaret depended on Caleb too much. He didn't notice because he believed love meant blending lives together, not choosing one over the other. Then Margaret fell ill. It started with dizziness and fatigue. Then came the fainting episode at church, the ambulance, the tests. The diagnosis hit like thunder, a heart condition that needed surgery and careful monitoring. Margaret tried to act brave, but Caleb saw the fear in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. He promised her he would be there. He promised her he'd make sure she was safe. He moved mountains at work to take time off. He slept in hospital chairs. He prayed in quiet corners. He watched nurses check her vitals and doctors speak in calm voices that never fully hid the seriousness underneath. Vanessa acted supportive at first. She posted encouraging messages online. She brought flowers. She kissed Caleb's cheek in front of people and told them she was holding the family together. But the moment they were alone, her mask slipped. She complained about the hospital smell, the inconvenience, the money, the time. She said it wasn't normal for a grown man to be so attached to his mother. She said they needed to focus on their marriage, their future, their plans. And Caleb, exhausted and scared, tried to keep peace. He told himself she was stressed. He told himself she didn't mean it. He told himself that love required patience. The night before, Caleb had been called into an emergency meeting at work. A major project had gone wrong, and his boss begged him to come in for a few hours. Caleb hated leaving the hospital, but Vanessa insisted she'd handle it. She said Margaret would be asleep anyway. She said Caleb needed to keep his job. She said, "Go, I'll take care of her." And Caleb believed her, because believing her was easier than imagining the alternative. But at 2:13 a.m., while he sat at his desk staring at spreadsheets, he got a strange voicemail. It wasn't from Vanessa. It wasn't from the hospital. It was from Margaret's phone, muffled and shaky, like her hand had slipped while recording. He heard a soft whimper. He heard Vanessa's voice, low and cold, saying something he couldn't fully make out. Then he heard Margaret cough like she was choking. The voicemail ended. Caleb didn't even grab his jacket. He ran to his car, drove through rain so hard it blurred the road, and prayed out loud the entire way like a desperate child. Now he stood outside the half-open door, his hand trembling on the handle. The room smelled like antiseptic and something else, something sharp, like bitterness. He pushed the door open. Vanessa was standing near the four-pole, her body blocking part of the bed. Margaret lay pale and sweating, her lips slightly blue, her chest rising unevenly like she was struggling to catch air. Her monitor showed an irregular rhythm. And Vanessa's face, her face wasn't worried, it wasn't panicked, it was annoyed. Like Margaret's suffering was an inconvenience. Caleb's eyes dropped to the 4-line. The drip rate was wrong, too fast. And beside it, on the tray table, was a small paper cup with pills in it, some crushed and mixed with water. Margaret's hands were weakly pushing it away. For a second, Caleb couldn't move. His brain refused to accept what his eyes were seeing. This was his wife, the woman he slept beside, the woman he trusted with his mother's life. Yet everything in the room screamed that something had been tampered with. Caleb surged forward, knocking the cup aside, grabbing the 4-line and staring at the label. His heart pounded like a war drum. He pressed the nurse call button so hard it nearly cracked. Vanessa snapped at him, saying he was overreacting, saying Margaret was refusing medication and needed to be managed. But Caleb didn't hear her excuses. He saw Margaret's eyes, wide with fear, trying to speak but barely able to form words. He leaned close and heard her whisper something broken and faint, a mother's last attempt to protect her son from betrayal. She tried to say Vanessa's name like a warning. The nurses rushed in. Then a doctor. Caleb pointed, demanded they check the dosage, demanded they review what had been given. The doctor's face tightened as he examined the line, then ordered it stopped immediately. The room became a storm of medical urgency. Oxygen mask, rapid vitals check, medication reversal. Margaret's body trembled, and Caleb held her hand, whispering prayers, his eyes burning with tears he didn't have time to wipe away. Vanessa stood in the corner, arms crossed, insisting she had done nothing wrong. She said the nurse must have set the drip. She said she was only following instructions, but the staff didn't look convinced. Caleb didn't look convinced either, not anymore. He demanded security footage. He demanded records. He demanded answers. Hours later, the truth began to unravel like a thread pulled from a sweater. A nurse supervisor showed Caleb the medication log. Vanessa had signed for medication she wasn't authorized to administer. She had requested an extra sedative dose to help Margaret sleep. She had insisted the nurse leave the room, saying she wanted privacy with her mother-in-law. And on camera, they saw Vanessa adjusting the 4 pump after the nurse walked away. Her face calm, her movements confident, like she had rehearsed it. Caleb felt sick, not just nauseous, spiritually sick, like his soul had been punched. He sat in the waiting area staring at the screen while the rain outside turned the city into a gray blur. He remembered every moment Vanessa complained about Margaret, every moment she called her a burden, every time she hinted that once Margaret was gone, Caleb could finally be free. He remembered Vanessa asking about Margaret's life insurance months ago, disguised as concern. When the hospital's security team arrived, they questioned Vanessa. She tried to charm them at first, then grew defensive, then furious. When they mentioned the footage, her eyes flashed with panic for just a second before she recovered. But Caleb saw it. That flash was the truth. The police were called. Vanessa's world cracked right there in a hospital hallway, under fluorescent lights, in front of strangers. She cried, then screamed, then blamed Caleb, blamed Margaret, blamed stress, blamed everything except herself. But the evidence didn't bend to her story. And Caleb, who once would have defended her with blind loyalty, stood still like a man waking from a nightmare. His silence was his final answer. Margaret survived that night, but barely. The doctor told Caleb that if he had arrived even 15 minutes later, the overdose could have stopped her breathing completely. Caleb walked into his mother's room at dawn and saw her sleeping peacefully, oxygen humming softly. He kissed her forehead like he used to when he was a child. He whispered that she was safe now. He promised her again, but this time it wasn't just a promise. It was a vow written in pain. In the days that followed, Caleb lived in a blur of court statements, hospital meetings, and deep, exhausting grief. The betrayal didn't just break his marriage, it broke his sense of reality. He kept thinking of the vows he spoke in church, how he believed God had brought Vanessa into his life. He kept thinking of how Margaret had always prayed for his happiness, and now the woman he chose had nearly stolen his mother's life. But something changed inside Caleb too. He stopped being the man who avoided conflict to keep peace. He became the man who protected what mattered, even if it cost him everything. He filed for divorce. He cooperated fully with the investigation. He moved his mother into his home after she was discharged, setting up a quiet room filled with sunlight, hymn music, and the scent of fresh coffee, small comforts that felt like healing. He attended counseling. He joined a church support group. He learned that love is not proven by staying in harm, but by stepping out of it. Margaret recovered slowly, her strength returning like a candle relighting after wind. Some mornings she cried from the trauma, and Caleb held her hand like a shield. Other mornings she smiled and thanked God for giving her more time. She told Caleb she was sorry, as if her illness had caused the chaos. And Caleb, with tears in his eyes, told her she never had to apologize for being his mother. He reminded her that she had given him everything, and protecting her was not a burden, it was an honor. Months later, the case closed with Vanessa facing serious consequences. Caleb didn't celebrate. He didn't feel victory. He only felt a quiet sadness that someone he loved had been capable of something so dark. Yet in that sadness he found something holy, clarity. He learned that sometimes God doesn't remove the storm. He reveals who is safe to stand with you inside it. Near the end of Margaret's recovery, Caleb took her back to the church where she first raised him in faith. The congregation welcomed her like family returning from war. Caleb watched his mother sing again, her voice shaky but alive, and he realized something powerful. The enemy had tried to silence her, but love had kept her breathing. If this story touched your heart, please don't scroll away quietly. Like the video, share it, and subscribe, because your support helps spread stories that remind people to choose kindness, protect family, and never ignore warning signs. And before the ending, I have a special request. Comment below the words, "Protect our mothers if you believe the people who raised us deserve safety, honor, and love." Caleb never forgot the night he returned early to the hospital. It haunted him, yes, but it also saved him. It taught him that sometimes the greatest miracles don't look like sudden wealth or perfect happiness. Sometimes miracles look like arriving in time, like a mother breathing again, like a son waking up to the truth, and like a heart choosing courage over comfort, so love can finally be real.